Ashes of the Soul Forged, Chapter 2. As observed by me, Phyellis of the Quiet Accord. Part 3. Necessary Violence. It's stubbornness, my father. Edrin had to stop, swallow past the grief that ambushed him. He believed the tool serves the craftsman, never the other way around. Wise man. Dead, I'm guessing? Because of me. Because I was there. Because soldiers wanted someone to hurt, and we were convenient. Because evil men made evil choices. Brother Francis corrected firmly. Unless you invited them? Asked them to murder your family? No? Then their choices are their own, and the blood is on their hands alone. It was simple theology, the kind preached in rural shrines where philosophy took second place to practicality. But sometimes simple was what you needed. Sometimes simple was all that stood between you and the abyss of overthinking. They finished the row as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The basket filled with orange plenty, proof that patient tending could coax bounty from dirt. It was a small thing, this victory of vegetables, but it mattered in the way all small things could matter when you paid attention. Come, Brother Francis said, standing with a grunt that spoke of knees aging faster than spirit. Let's see about that supper, and maybe finding you a place to lay that sword where it won't whisper all night. We've a shed for dangerous things. Mostly it holds the donations from well-meaning nobles who think poor folks need silver more than soup. But it's warded well enough to keep temptation at bay. Supper was communal chaos barely contained by tradition. The shrine's main hall held 3 long tables, each scarred by decades of use. Travellers, local faithful, and resident priests mixed without regard for station or story. The food was simple, bread still warm from the ovens, vegetable soup rich with the garden's bounty, small beer that tasted of honey and hope. But it was plentiful, and it was offered without question or price. Edrin found himself seated between a travelling tinker and a family of refugees from the border regions. Across from him, Sarah Covenant fed her children with mechanical motions. Present in body, but absent in spirit. Grief that fresh needed time to scab before it could begin to heal. The tinker, a gap-toothed man named Willem, filled the silence with cheerful chatter about roads and weather and the best places to ford streams swollen by autumn rain. He had the particular gift of those who lived by trade, the ability to talk without demanding response, creating comfortable noise that allowed others their privacy. Course, the ash flow's running red again, he mentioned casually. Iron from the mountains, they say, though I've heard other theories. Some folk claim it's blood from the battles up north, symbolic-like. The land itself bleeding from all the foolishness. It's iron, said one of the refugees, a hard-faced woman with fighter's calluses. I've seen the source. Old mines, older curses. The ash flow's been running red since before Silver Shore was a fishing village. Nothing mystical about it. Just the earth giving up its metals slow and steady. Maybe so, Willem agreed easily. But symbols matter, don't they? People see a red river in wartime. They think omens. Think God's taking notice. Think the world's trying to tell them something. The world's always trying to tell us something, Mira observed from down the table. Problem is, we're usually too busy talking to listen. The conversation drifted to other topics, harvest predictions, trade route closures, which nobles were feuding this week, normal concerns for normal people trying to navigate abnormal times. Edrin let it wash over him, grateful for the mundane anchoring it provided. 6 voices in his head wanted to contribute their opinions, but he kept his mouth busy with soup instead. Mother Kess appeared as the meal wound down. moving between tables with the practiced ease of someone who'd been managing communal spaces since before half her charges were born. She paused beside Edrin, studying him with eyes that had seen enough to recognize danger but chosen compassion anyway. Brother Francis says you're carrying something that shouldn't be carried. Yes, and yet you carry it anyway. Someone has to. And I... He searched for words that could explain the weight of divine intervention, of being chosen without choosing. I seem to have been elected. She produced a key from her robes, iron worn smooth by handling. The sheds around back, warded as Francis mentioned. Not pretty magic, but effective. Your burden can rest there tonight, and you can remember what sleep without whispers feels like. Will the wards hold it? They'll hold its influence. The blade itself could cut through them like smoke, but it would have to want to. And weapons, even awakened ones, rarely want things without a hand to guide them. She placed the key on the table between them. Your choice, but I'd recommend taking the chance to rest properly. You look like you haven't in days. She moved on before he could respond, leaving the decision in his hands. The key sat on scarred wood, innocent as iron could be, offering possibility. Sorrow's edge pulsed against his back, disapproval radiating through the wrappings. We are not some tool to be stored when inconvenient. We are partnership. We are power. We are... You are hungry, Edrin murmured, always hungry, and I need one night where that hunger isn't the loudest sound in my head. You will need us, soon. The road holds more than bandits, and mercy is a luxury you can't afford forever. Maybe, but tonight I can afford it. Tonight I choose it. He stood, decision made, and walked toward the promise of quiet. The shed was exactly as described. A stone building that had aspirations of being a storage room, but had settled for being secure. Inside, shadows gathered around objects that radiated various degrees of mistake. A jewelled chalice that no doubt carried curses with its wine. A mirror wrapped in black cloth that probably showed more than reflections. A dozen lesser items that whispered promises they couldn't keep. And now, sorrow's edge. Edrin unwrapped the blade carefully, feeling its displeasure at being handled like common steel. The red gem pulsed faster, agitated by the prospect of separation. Around them, the walls hummed with power, not the grand sorcery of mage towers, but the patient warding of rural priests who understood that keeping evil out mattered less than keeping it contained. One night, he told the sword. I need one night to remember who I am, without you showing me who I could become. Weak, the blade accused. Without us, you are just a boy playing at purpose. They will come, hunters, soldiers, worse things, and find you defenseless. Their blood will paint your peaceful walls, and you will beg for our return. Maybe. He set the sword on a stand clearly meant for such burdens. But tonight I'll risk it. The moment his hand left the hilt, the world went quiet. Not silent. He could still hear evening birds, distant voices, the whisper of wind through autumn leaves. But the constant hunger that had been his companion for 4 days vanished like smoke. The awareness of life forces around him, each one catalogued as potential food, disappeared. The whispered suggestions, the promised power, the seductive certainty that violence was always the answer, gone. He was just Edrin, tired, grieving. 15 years old and carrying too much, but just himself. The relief of it buckled his knees. He sat hard on the shed's floor, back against stone that held no judgment, and let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. His family dead. His life ended and restarted. His hands red with the necessary blood. 6 minds crowding his skull with their fears and failures. But for now, for this blessed moment, the sword couldn't make it seem reasonable, couldn't transform grief into rage, loss into hunger, pain into power. He could just hurt, and sometimes that was what healing required. When he finally emerged, full dark had claimed the shrine grounds. Someone, Mira probably, had left a bundle by the door, clean clothes that almost fit, a blanket that had seen better years but still held warmth, a note in careful script, 3rd door left, bed by window. Don't dream of swords. The promised bed was narrow but clean, in a room meant for pilgrims and refugees and those who needed sanctuary from more than weather. 2 other beds held sleeping forms, the Tinker Willem and someone who snored like mountains grinding together. The window looked out on the cemetery, where carved stones remembered lives lived gently and died the same. Edrin lay down fully clothed, unwilling to trust peace enough for vulnerability. Without sorrow's edge, exhaustion hit like a hammer. 4 days of walking, fighting, resisting. 4 days of being more than human and less than whole. His eyes closed without his permission, and for the first time since the forge, he dreamed his own dreams. Dawn came gentle to the shrine, and with it came clarity. Edrin woke to find his body had made decisions without him. Sometime in the night, he'd shed boots and outer clothes, trusting safety enough to seek comfort. His sleep had been deep, dreamless, the kind that actually restored rather than merely palsied consciousness. But even as he stretched muscles grateful for rest, he could feel the wrongness of separation. It wasn't sorrow's edge calling. The shed's wards held that influence at bay. This was simpler and more disturbing. He'd grown accustomed to the weapon's weight, to its awareness, to the terrible comfort of always having an answer to violence. Without it, he felt naked in ways that had nothing to do with steel. Dependency comes quick, Mira observed from the doorway. She'd entered silent as morning mist, carrying tea that steamed promise, especially with tools that solve problems by creating worse ones. How long were you watching? Long enough to see you sleep peaceful? That's rare with soul touched. She offered the tea, herb-scented, honey-sweetened, normal in every way that mattered. Most can't bear separation after the first day. The screaming usually starts by the 2nd hour. You know about soul weapons? It wasn't a question. I know about many things. Benefit of walking long enough. You either learn to recognize danger or you stop walking altogether. She settled onto the opposite bed with the ease of someone welcome everywhere or nowhere. Question is, what do you know about what you're carrying? Edrin considered while the tea cooled his throat and warmed his belly. I know it's hungry, always. I know it makes killing easy and everything else hard. I know it wants to own me, and every time I use it, I lose ground in that battle. Good start. What else? It teaches. Every death feeds it, but also feeds me. Skills, memories, knowledge I shouldn't have. He hesitated, then pushed forward. I carry 6 dead men in my head now. Sometimes I can't tell which thoughts are mine. 6. Mira's eyebrows rose. In 4 days? That's... She trailed off, calculating. 3 at the forge, 3 on the road yesterday. 3 at the forge, none on the road. None, but the bandits were the first since I left home. The admission tasted like shame and pride mixed. I let one of the soldiers go. Have been avoiding people since. Trying to starve it out, maybe. Or just trying not to become what it wants me to be. Mira studied him with those two old eyes, and for a moment something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. That's unusual. Most soul-touch glut themselves early. The power's too intoxicating, the hunger too demanding. By the time they think to resist, they're more weapon than wielder. My father believed in the sovereignty of the craftsman, and you're trying to honour that. Noble, probably futile, but noble. She sipped her own tea, movements deliberate. Tell me, Edrin Smith's son, what do you plan to do? Wander the back roads forever? Hide from what you become? Pretend that sword isn't calling you even now? She was right. Even through the wards, he could feel sorrow's edge. Not its voice, not its hunger, but its presence. Like knowing where your hand is, without looking. Part of him now, in ways that terrified and comforted in equal measure. I don't know, he admitted. I know what I don't want, to become a monster. But what else is there for someone like me? Options, Mira said simply. Always options, even when they're all bad. But first breakfast. Then morning chores. Brother Francis mentioned you're handy with garden work. After that, maybe we talk about why I was really on that road, and why meeting you feels less like coincidence and more like the kind of pattern that makes gods nervous. The morning passed in mundane glory. Edrin helped Brother Francis tend the gardens while Dawn painted everything gold and green. They worked in companionable silence, broken only by necessary communication about tools and technique. The priest asked no questions about the shed or its contents. Some knowledge was best left unspoken, like seeds that needed darkness to germinate. After gardens came general maintenance, a loose board in the chicken coop, a gate with hinges that squealed accusation every time it moved, small problems with simple solutions that yielded to hammer and nail and patient attention. The work settled something in Edrin's chest, connecting him to memories that belonged only to him. Brand teaching him that creation was its own reward, that making things better was always possible, even in small ways. He was oiling the repaired gate when the children found him. Marcus and Eleanor Covenant, dressed in clean clothes that didn't quite fit, faces puffy from crying, but determined to continue living despite loss. They watched him work with the fascination of those too young to fully grasp yesterday's horror, but old enough to know he'd been part of it. You killed them, Marcus said. Not accusation, just fact, filed alongside other facts like sky blue and water wet. Yes. They were going to hurt Mama. Yes. Does it make you sad, killing people? Edrin set down the oil can, giving the question the weight it deserved. Two children who'd lost their father to violence, trying to understand if violence was always evil or sometimes necessary. The sword would have had easy answers. Strength matters. Weakness invites predation. Kill or be killed. But the sword was locked away, and these children deserved better philosophy than that. It makes me sad that it was necessary, he said finally. Those men made choices that led to death. I wish they'd chosen differently, but they didn't, and your mother needed protecting, so I did what had to be done. But yes, it makes me sad. It should always make us sad when life ends, even necessary endings. Elena, younger and thus less concerned with philosophy, tugged at his sleeve. Mama says we're staying here for a while, until she decides what to do. Will you stay too? I don't know. Maybe for a little while. Good, she declared with the certainty of 6 years old. You should teach Marcus to fight, so he can protect me next time. Elena, Marcus flushed red. I can protect you fine. You hid behind the wheel? That's called being smart. They devolved into sibling bickering, normal and necessary as breathing. Edrin watched them argue about courage and cowardice and the proper response to danger, and felt something ease in his chest. Children adapting, life continuing. The world knitting itself back together around wounds that would scar but not fester. Come on, he told them when the argument threatened to become physical. Let's see if Brother Francis needs help with lunch. Protecting people's easier on a full stomach. They followed him like ducklings, still arguing but together. Behind them, morning advanced toward noon, and somewhere in a warded shed, a sword waited with patience, born of certainty. It knew he'd come back. They always did. The conversation that changed everything happened over bread and cheese, simple fare eaten in the shade of an apple tree heavy with fruit. Mira had found him there after the noon meal, carrying her own portion and settling beside him without invitation or apology. I wasn't on that road by accident, she began without preamble. Been walking it for 3 weeks, back and forth, waiting. Not sure for what exactly. Just waiting. You know the feeling when the world holds its breath? When something's about to change, but hasn't quite started. Edrin nodded. He'd felt it in the forge that night, pressure building toward inevitability. 3 weeks of that feeling, 3 weeks of watching travellers pass, none of them what I was waiting for. Then you fell on your face in the dust, and something in my chest said, there. She tore a piece of bread, precise movements. I've learned to listen when the universe gets that specific. You're God-touched, not a question. Once, long time ago. Different kind than yours, though. She smiled rueful. Ashara the gentle took notice when I was young and stupid enough to think divine attention was a gift. Gave me a blessing. I'd always find what I sought. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Sounds like a curse? Smart boy. Yes, it was. Because seeking isn't always conscious, and finding what you seek isn't the same as finding what you want. She gestured at the peaceful shrine grounds. Found my way here eventually. The priests helped me understand the difference between being God-touched and God-owned. Taught me to make peace with the blessing. Now I mostly use it to find lost children and missing sheep. Small seeks, safe ones. But not this time. No, this time I was seeking something bigger. Didn't know what until I saw you, but the recognition was immediate. She turned to face him fully. You're going to change things, Edrin. Not because you want to, but because what you are demands change. A soul weapon that doesn't consume its wielder? A boy who says no to power? You're an impossibility that forces the world to reconsider its rules. I'm just trying not to become a monster. And that's exactly what makes you dangerous. Monsters are predictable. They consume and destroy and eventually burn themselves out. But someone who refuses to be monstrous while carrying monstrous power. She shook her head. That's the kind of paradox that makes gods nervous and topples kingdoms. I don't want to topple anything. I just want... He trailed off, uncertain what he wanted beyond not to kill everyone. Peace? Sorry, that door closed when Nethrix marked you. Purpose? That's coming whether you seek it or not. Control? She laughed, not unkindly. Boy, the only control any of us really have is over our choices, and you've been making interesting ones. What do you want from me? Nothing. Everything. I want to see what you become. I want to help if I can. I want to be there when the world realizes its assumptions about power and corruption need revising. She stood, brushing crumbs from her skirts. But first, I want to show you something. Come on, bring the sword. What? You heard me. You can't hide from it forever. Can't pretend it's not part of you now. Time to stop running and start understanding. The shed's wards recognized him now, parting like curtains as he approached. Inside, Sorrow's Edge waited with the patience of a predator certain of its prey. The blade hummed recognition as he lifted it, satisfaction radiating through their connection. "Missed us," it purred. "Knew you would. They always do." "We're not having a reunion," Edrin told it. "We're having a lesson." Mira led him behind the shrine to a clearing that showed signs of regular use. Scattered stones marked boundaries. The grass grew different here, shorter and tougher, speaking of feet that moved in combat patterns. A training ground, though not recently used. "The priests here aren't all peaceful philosophers," Mira explained. "Some came from military backgrounds. They understand that sometimes protecting peace requires knowing war. This is where they remember those skills, just in case." She moved to the center of the clearing and did something with her stance that transformed her from wandering woman to waiting warrior. Not threatening, but ready. The change was subtle and profound. Weight distributed differently. Awareness sharpened, hands positioned for action or restraint. "Draw the blade," she instructed. "I don't want to fight you." "Good. I don't want to fight you either. But I want to see how you fight, how the blade fights. How much is you and how much is it?" She smiled. "Don't worry. I'm very good at not dying." Edrin drew Sorrow's Edge reluctantly. The blade sang joy at freedom, eager to taste blood again. But when he settled into a ready stance, he felt the wrongness immediately. His body tried to adopt 6 different positions simultaneously. His own half-remembered training, Mars' brutal efficiency, Voss's textbook perfection, Rawn's battlefield pragmatism, and now Garrett, Marcus, and Tom's various inadequacies. "There," Mira said. "See? You're fighting yourself before anyone else. The blade gives you skill, but you haven't integrated it. You're wearing those deaths like ill-fitting clothes instead of making them part of your own repertoire." She moved, not attacking, just circling. Edrin tracked her automatically, but his footwork stuttered between patterns. One step Mars, the next Voss's, creating awkward fusion that satisfied no one. "Stop thinking," Mira advised. "Stop trying to be them. You're not 6 dead men. You're one living boy who happens to know what they knew. Their knowledge, your choice, how to use it. Easier said than done." But he tried, focusing on his own awareness rather than inherited instinct. When Mira finally moved, a testing strike with an imaginary blade, he responded with something that wasn't quite any single style, but borrowed from all. "Better," she approved, again. They spent an hour in that careful dance. She attacked with empty hands that somehow conveyed weapon weight. He defended with a blade that wanted blood but found only air. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand what she meant. The stolen knowledge was there, available, but he didn't have to let it drive. He could choose which technique served the moment, which instincts to trust, which voices to silence. "You're still holding back," Mira observed after a particularly clumsy exchange. The blade wants what all weapons want to fulfill their purpose, but you define that purpose." She stopped, breathing slightly hard. "Tell me, what did your father make, besides swords?" "Everything. Horseshoes, nails, hinges, tools, cookware, whatever the village needed." "And did the iron complain? Did it say, 'I want to be a sword, not a soup ladle'?" "Iron doesn't want anything." "Neither does steel, not really. It's shaped by its making, yes, but the smith decides the shape." She gestured at Sorrow's Edge. That's more complex than simple steel, but the principle holds. It has hunger, purpose, will. But you decide how those manifest. You're the craftsman. It's the tool. It doesn't feel like a tool. It feels like... He searched for words. Like a partner that wants to lead every dance. Then teach it to follow, or better yet, teach it that dancing isn't always about leading or following. Sometimes it's about moving together towards something neither could achieve alone. She left him there to think, returning to whatever tasks called her. Edrin remained in the clearing as afternoon shadows lengthened, sword across his knees, trying to find balance between what he was, what he'd been, and what he was becoming. The blade hummed against his hands, hungry but temporarily content. It had tasted freedom again, been allowed to move, to purpose. That was progress from its perspective. The boy was learning to accept necessity, but Edrin felt something different. Not acceptance, but understanding. The sword was part of him now, yes. But parts could be integrated without dominating. A smith's hammer hand grew strong from use, but the hand still belonged to the smith. "We're going to have to find a way to live together," he told the blade, "but on my terms. I'll feed you when necessary, use you when justified, but I won't become your puppet. I won't let hunger choose my path." Sorrow's edge pulsed considering. Then, for the first time since their joining, it offered something besides demand. Acceptable, for now. It wasn't peace, it wasn't resolution, but it was a beginning. That night, Edrin kept the sword with him, not from desire, but from recognition that separation solved nothing. He couldn't spend his life running to warded sheds, couldn't pretend the blade away. If he was going to master this burden, he needed to face it constant. The other pilgrims gave him space. Word travelled quick in small communities, and everyone knew he carried something best, not examined close. But they didn't shun him. Sarah Covenant nodded greeting. Willem the tinker shared road gossip. The refugee family included him in their evening prayers to whatever gods might listen. He slept with sorrow's edge beside the bed, wrapped but present. The sword's hunger was a constant whisper, but quieter now. Their afternoon understanding held. It would wait. He would choose. Together they would find a way to be terrible and necessary without becoming evil. His dreams were still not his own. 6 dead men had too much to say, but he was learning to sort them, to file away what might be useful and let the rest fade. Mar's guilt over that century could go, but his knowledge of patrol patterns might matter. Voss's rigid fear could be discarded, but his discipline had value. Each death was a library. He just needed to learn which books to keep. Morning came with decision. "You're leaving," Mira said. Not a question. She'd found him in the garden, saying goodbye to vegetables he'd helped tend. "I can't stay. It's too peaceful here. Too tempting to pretend I could just stop. Be a gardener. Live quiet." He touched a tomato plant, heavy with green fruit that wouldn't ripen before frost. "But that's not what I am now, and the longer I hide, the easier it becomes to keep hiding." "Where will you go?" "South, maybe. Away from the building war. Find somewhere to practice being what I am, without endangering good people." "Alone?" He looked at her. This strange woman who'd appeared when needed, who understood too much, who carried her own divine burden with hard-won grace. "I don't know. Walking alone seems safer, but also lonelier." She produced an apple from somewhere she always had apples, and cut it in half with a knife that appeared and disappeared too quick to follow. Here's a thought. I've been walking roads for 20 years. Know the safe paths, the dangerous ones, the ones that change depending on season. Know which towns welcome strangers and which make them disappear. Might be useful knowledge for someone learning to balance necessary violence with unnecessary mercy. You'd come with me? Why? Because my blessing says you're what I was seeking. Because you're going to need help. And I'm curious enough to provide it. Because... She handed him half the apple. Because sharing fruit on the road is better than eating alone. He took the apple, understanding the weight of symbolism. Shared food meant shared fate, at least for a while. I can't promise safety. Boy, I've been God-touched longer than you've been alive. Safety's an illusion I gave up decades ago. She bit into her half of the apple with evident satisfaction. But I can promise to help you remember that swords aren't the only tool for solving problems. Sometimes an apple works better. And sometimes you need the sword. That's what makes the choice matter. They left that afternoon, supplied by grateful priests who understood that some problems needed to walk away before they could be solved. Sarah Covenant wept thanks that seemed too large for what he'd done. Her children demanded promises to visit, to write, to remember them. He made what promises he could, knowing that his path might not allow keeping them. The road south stretched before them, dusty with autumn and bright with possibility. Mira walked with the steady pace of someone who'd covered many miles and expected to cover many more. Edrin matched her, sorrow's edge across his back. 6 dead men in his head, but his own feet choosing the direction. Behind them, the shrine of Ashara the Gentle returned to its patient work of mending what the world broke. Ahead, the future waited with all its terrible potential. Between past and future, 2 God-touched souls walked together, sharing the weight of divine attention and the simple pleasure of apples in afternoon sun. It was not resolution, it was not redemption, but it was a step, and steps taken enough times in the right direction could lead anywhere, even home, though that might be a different place than the one left behind. 3 days south, the war found them. Not the grand clash of armies that history would remember, but the smaller violence that made such clashes possible. A village burning. Soldiers in Silvershore colours putting torch to thatch while citizens fled with what they could carry. The accusation was collaboration, selling grain to Dragon's Bend. The truth was simpler, hunger and coin and the foolish belief that commerce could remain neutral. Edrin and Mira crested the hill as the mill caught fire, ancient timbers surrendering to flame with the exhausted sigh of something too tired to fight. Below them, chaos played out in miniature, a sergeant directing the burning with bored efficiency. Soldiers more interested in loot than glory. Villagers scattering like seeds before a harsh wind. And one soldier, younger than the rest, cornering a girl against a garden wall. Sorrow's edge sang its eagerness before Edrin's conscious mind processed the scene. Here was justification. Here was righteous purpose. Here was the kind of clean violence that even good men could embrace. The blade's hunger rose like floodwater, promising strength, speed, certainty. All he had to do was draw. All he had to do was feed. "Wait," Mira said quietly. "Wait!" Heat rose in his chest, his own anger mixing with 6 dead men's experience of how such scenes ended. He's going to... I know what he intends. But look, really look. See the whole pattern before you cut it. She was right. She was wrong. She was offering the kind of wisdom that came from walking long enough to see how single moments connected to larger designs. But below them, A girl, perhaps 14, pressed against stone, while a soldier decided what he wanted more than dignity. I can't. Then don't. But if you're going to act, see clearly first. Count the soldiers. Note their positions. Understand that saving one might mean failing to save others. This is the choice that breaks most heroes. Learning that good intentions aren't enough when the math is cruel. 12 soldiers visible, more probably inside the houses, taking what generations had gathered. The sergeant commanding them stood central, watching everything with the satisfaction of someone who'd found an excuse for cruelty. Even if Edrin could take them all, and with sorrow's edge, he probably could, the bloodbath would traumatize the very people he meant to save. But the girl. The soldier reached for her, and decision crystallized. Not the grand gesture of stories, but the simple certainty that some lines couldn't be crossed while he watched. Edrin drew sorrow's edge and moved before wisdom could counsel otherwise. He didn't run, didn't charge screaming challenge. He walked down the hill with the steady purpose of someone who'd made peace with necessity. The blade hummed in his hand, pleased but puzzled by the restraint. It wanted sprint and strike and feast. He gave it careful approach and consideration. The first soldier to notice him was the one menacing the girl. Young, maybe 17. Face still soft with youth despite the hardness he was trying to project. He turned at footsteps, saw armed stranger approaching and made the fatal mistake of hesitating. "Step away," Edrin said, not threatening, just stating what would happen. "This isn't your concern, traveller. Official military business." Burning mills is military business. What you're contemplating is just cruelty wearing uniform. He stopped 10 paces away, close enough to act, but far enough to seem conversational. Step away, find another hobby, live to regret better choices. The soldier's hand went to his sword. Around them, others began noticing the confrontation. The sergeant turned from his supervision of destruction, assessing this new variable in his afternoon's entertainment. "You threatening King Soldier's boy?" "I'm offering alternatives. Your man walks away, I walk away, everyone keeps their blood inside their skin." Edrin felt sorrow's edge pulse disagreement. The blade wanted violence, needed it, had been patient too long. But he held it back, offering chance where appetite counselled slaughter. Generous. "But we don't take orders from wandering sellswords." The sergeant nodded to his men. "Take him. Try not to make too much mess. Blood's hard to wash out of good cloth." They moved with the casual confidence of those who'd always had numbers and authority on their side. 4 soldiers approaching from different angles, expecting this to end quick and educational. Edrin sighed. "I tried." Then he stopped trying. Violence, when necessary, should be swift. That was Voss's contribution to the moment, the understanding that prolonged battle served no one. Make your point quick. End what needs ending. Move on. The first soldier died before finishing his approach. Sorrow's edge took him through the throat, a perfect thrust that spoke of Mars' experience with anatomy. The blade drank deep, pulling memory and skill and the particular sorrow of a man who'd joined for steady pay and found only steady dying. Willem, his name had been Willem, like the tinker. Farm boy with too many siblings and too little land. Liked dice, but lost often. Sent half his pay home to a mother who'd never know why the coin stopped coming. The knowledge flooded in as Edrin spun to meet the second attacker. Willem's trained responses merged with what he already carried, creating something new, not replacing but reinforcing, like metal folded upon itself to create strength through layers. This soldier, Eric, managed to raise his blade in defence. It didn't matter. Sorrow's edge sheared through common steel like paper, continuing through to find the life beneath. More memories, a childhood spent by the sea, dreams of sailing traded for soldier's certainty, a sweetheart in Silvershore who'd already moved on though he didn't know it yet. 2 deaths? 2 feasts? The blade sang satisfaction while Edrin struggled to remain himself beneath the flood of foreign experience. He was 15. He was 17. He was 23. He was everyone and no one, moving with the terrible grace of aggregated skill. The 3rd soldier tried to run, sensible, but Sorrow's edge had been denied too long and wouldn't be cheated of a full meal. Edrin's body moved without permission, launching into pursuit that ended with steel through spine and another life added to his collection. This one was Aldrich, cruel in small ways, the kind who enjoyed authority over those who couldn't resist. His memories tasted sour, full of petty victories and smaller defeats. But even rotten fruit carried nutrients. His knowledge of intimidation, of reading weakness, of exploiting advantage, all of it poured into Edrin's expanding reservoir of unwanted wisdom. The 4th soldier threw down his weapon and ran, young, terrified, smart enough to recognize death walking. Edrin let him go, wrestling Sorrow's edge back under control. The blade raged at the denial, so close, so hungry, so ready. But he held firm. Enough, he said aloud, needing to hear his own voice through the chorus of the dead. Enough. The sergeant hadn't moved during the brief slaughter. Now he studied Edrin with the calculation of someone reassessing threat levels. Around them, other soldiers drew together, uncertain whether to attack or retreat. The villagers had used the distraction to scatter further, including the girl who'd been the catalyst. Good. At least something clean had come from the bloodshed. Interesting blade, the sergeant observed. His voice stayed steady despite watching 3 men die in as many heartbeats. Soul-touched, unless I miss my guess. Don't see many of those. Don't see many wielders stay sane long enough to matter. I'm working on it. So I see. Question is, what now? You've killed King's soldiers. That's treason at best, declaration of war at worst. You planning to finish what you started? It would be easy. Sorrow's edge whispered the paths to victory. Who to strike first, how to move, where each soldier would try to flee. 12 had become 9, and 9 was nothing to a blade that had tasted divine power. He could paint the village red and call it justice. But Mira's words echoed, see the whole pattern before you cut it. I'm planning to walk away, Edrin said. You're going to let me. Because the alternative is, I kill you all. And while that might serve justice, it won't serve anyone else. The village is already burning. The point is already made. Adding to the body count helps no one. You think I care about body counts? I think you care about your own body, and I think you're smart enough to recognize a fight that ends with everyone dead, including you. He lowered Sorrow's edge slightly, not sheathing it, but offering possibility. Walk away. Find other villages to terrorize. Live to make better choices tomorrow. The sergeant considered. Around them, smoke rose from burning homes, while autumn wind carried the smell of ending. Finally, he nodded. Pull back, he ordered his men. We're done here. But Sarge, I said we're done, unless you want to test steel against whatever that thing is. No one did. Then move. Form up on the road. We've got reports to file about bandits operating in the area. Dangerous ones. Soul-touched even. Tragic how they killed 3 of ours before we drove them off. He looked at Edrin once more, soldier to whatever Edrin was becoming. This isn't over. You've made an enemy today. I've made several. Get in line. The soldiers withdrew with the particular discipline of those who'd learned the difference between retreat and rout. Edrin watched them go, sorrow's edge still hungry in his hand, 3 new voices joining the chorus in his head. When they'd passed from sight, he finally let himself feel the weight of what he'd done. More death, more memory, more of himself slipping away beneath the accumulation of others. 9, he said when Mira reached him. She'd stayed on the hill watching, evaluating, letting him make his choices and live with consequences. I'm carrying 9 dead men now. And yourself? Don't forget that. You're still in there, no matter how crowded it gets. She looked at the corpses, professional in her assessment. Quick work. Clean mostly. You're learning control. It doesn't feel like control, it feels like drowning slow. Maybe, but you let one run. That's choice. That's will trumping hunger. She kicked dirt over the worst of the blood, practical about horror. Come on. The villagers will return soon and gratitude gets complicated when it comes with fear. Best we move on before they decide we're worse than what we saved them from. They left the burning village behind, smoke rising like prayers to gods who weren't listening, or perhaps were listening too intently. Either way, the war had found them, and Edrin had fed his blade, and the world turned on despite the weight of death. 9 voices in his head now, 9 sets of skills and sorrows and small wisdoms. But still underneath it all, one boy trying to remember his father's lesson. The tool serves the craftsman, never the other way around. It was getting harder to believe, but belief, like roads, was made by walking. 1 step at a time, 1 choice at a moment, 1 small defiance against the hungry dark, even if the dark was winning. I watched them walk south as afternoon died into evening, and I wondered at the patterns forming around the boy who should not be. Edrin was becoming something unprecedented, not unique. There had been other soul weapon wielders who'd retained sanity for a time, but none who'd done so by accepting the weapon's nature while rejecting its dominion. He fed sorrow's edge when necessary, but not when convenient. He integrated stolen knowledge without losing his core identity. He walked the knife's edge between monster and man with the balance of someone who'd learned that falling either way meant failure. The war was spreading. I could feel it in the probability streams. Villages burned. Trade routes became battlegrounds. The small cruelties that made larger atrocities possible multiplied like infection in a wound. And through it all, gods watched and waited. Ishkara had not forgotten the forge. Her attention searched for the boy who'd survived what should have killed him. When she found him, and she would, her response would not be gentle. Netherix watched too, amused by his accidental creation. A soul weapon that created rather than merely destroyed. A wielder who chose mercy when murder was easier. These were puzzles worth observing, and above all, the Aurelian maintained their vigil. My kind, watching the balance tip toward chaos and forbidden from acting. That moment was coming when observation alone would not suffice. I felt it in the way reality stretched around Edrin's impossibility, the way patterns broke and reformed in his wake. He was catalyst and reaction both, changing everything he touched simply by being what he was. A boy who refused to become his weapon, a weapon forced to accept limits, a partnership that should not exist, creating possibilities that should not be. The quiet accord bound me still. But I could hope, quietly and within all prescribed boundaries, that when the forces gathering finally converged on this impossible boy, he would continue to choose the harder path. Because the easy path led only to ash and ending, and the world, for all its cruelty, deserved better than that.
The story continues, as all stories must. Find the next chapter at Codex 11. Subscribe, lest the Forge's call go unheard. The Forge is patient, but it does not wait forever.